My name is Krzysztof Zanussi. I am a Polish film and stage director. And by the occasion of the 100th anniversary of birth of John Paul II, I would like to share with you some of my recollections, because I had the privilege to be acquainted with the future Pope, at that time Auxiliary Bishop of Krakow, already in the 50s, many years ago. And what I remember is something very personal and very surprising to me as a young student who has met a bishop, was that this bishop had astonishing attention to people whom he was meeting. Whenever he shared with somebody a word, he was also very intensively with the person to whom he was talking. Later on, during my studies, I realized that this is personalism, one of the philosophical currents, in its practical implementation. He was simply caring about each individual and always tried to see individual people. Now we are 100 years from his birth, so we may ask a question: how he is going to be remembered, what legacy he left. And from the international point of view, usually people attribute him his role, his contribution to the process of dismounting, let us say, the empire of evil, as Mrs. Thatcher was calling Soviet Union and its sphere of influence. And indeed, John Paul II had big contribution to the process of dismounting communist regime, but I wouldn't put it on the first line of his achievements. I think there are others that will last longer. The most important for me, from my point of view, is the fact that he brought some air of freshness and optimism, and he was looking to future. He was looking to the youth. He was saying Christianity, by its nature, may be always and should be always progressive. So it is not a museum, it is not something based on nostalgic feelings about the time when Catholic Church had also remarkable power over society. But the message of Evangel is totally different, and it is all about spiritual dimension, and that's what Marxism was missing. And John Paul II not reinvented but accentuated very strongly was the fact that there is room in future for Christianity, and we should be optimistic about it. It is evident that his contribution to ecumenism and meeting in Assisi was a great break. It is equally important that he admitted wrongdoings of the Christians and of the Catholic Church and of the papacy. The last point which I will call is, of course, opening to Judaism, the historical visit to the synagogue. But this is all publicly known. What is less remembered is that John Paul II was an artist, and he had a great understanding to the position of an artist, and this hiatus between art and church he tried to overcome with his letter to the artists, and with simple fact that he was also active poet as a pope, and whatever he couldn't put to his encyclica, he was able to put to his poem. The Roman triptych, written by the end of his pontificate, is a valuable example. He was also a playwright. and he left a couple of plays, and in this stage plays, he was touching great problems of humanity. He was writing them well before he became a pope, but I think the depth of his thought is remarkable. So he created Pontifical Culture, Commission for Culture, which is also something original. However, it was not all successful. But at the end, I would say maybe the biggest merit of this pontificate is reconciliation. First is reconciliation with future, but the other is reconciliation with the reason and with science. This is something that is less noticed. His encyclica Fides et Ratio is of great importance. And one, let us say, marginal document he has written close to the end of pontificate, when he was encouraging in his letter to the head of pontifical astronomical observatory that belongs to Vatican, he addressed its president, Professor Jesuit. He addressed a letter to him, and this letter was encouraging the opening to the instruments, mental, intellectual instruments of modern science, and apply them to modern theology. Theology based on St. Thomas is a great construction and shaped the whole spiritual dimension of Europe, and the world, and the Christianity, not only Catholics. But now we need new step. And maybe it is premature, because there are very few theologians who have any knowledge of modern science. But science after Newton, science from the time, at the time of Niels Bohr, of quantum theory, of theory of relativity, gives methods of thinking that may approach us closer to something what is anyway absolutely not comprehensive for human mind, because we live in 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, and maybe the reality is more than that, and that puts us in front of God with some better intuition what God may be like. We would never understand it, but we may be closer. And I think this contribution of John Paul II is particularly valid and is a little bit forgotten. But there are places in the world when there are new theologians who are studying Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr, and I think they will one day reopen Christianity to the totally different and most modern thinking.